Welcome to the Armchair Constituents, the weekly podcast about news topics. While we're not experts or academics, we do like to speak our voice freely. And keep in mind that as the facts change, so can our opinions.
We are now about to present the main attraction of our world-famous show.
Welcome to the Armchair Constituents, episode number 9. So yeah, I know you're excited. We're almost at number 10. But
I know, man. Double digits. We're coming.
I'm Jeff, and this is my co-host Kramer. Yeah, I don't have anything to add at the beginning, so let's just get right into updates. SCOTUS, you wanted to talk about the Supreme Court again this week?
Yeah. So last week we had talked about the case of Cooper v. Harris, where North Carolina up in the Supreme Court justifying a couple of gerrymandered districts that they had. And the Supreme Court ruled against North Carolina, said, you can't have these districts gerrymandered in this way because they represent a racial gerrymandering. And they had heard this before and Clarence Thomas had voted in the same way that he'd voted previously. Kennedy kind of flip-flopped, so it was a really interesting case. But one of the things that we had talked about last week in reference to it was that it's illegal to racially gerrymander, but it is totally legal to gerrymander along party lines. And so you can just gerrymander the hell out of something to make the Democrats lose or win in a very clustered type district. And potentially next term, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case. It's either called Gill v. Whitlock or Gale v. Whitlock. I can't remember the name. I couldn't find it. But basically, they're going to settle the issue hear the issue potentially of political gerrymandering. And that's the big issue because Justice Kennedy, again, my favorite justice, said several times that he's against political gerrymandering. He doesn't like it, but his ruling in this most recent case said, I don't like it, but it's legal. So if that gets heard, that'll be particularly interesting.
So wait, if that is ruled against political gerrymandering, does that mean that like we're gonna have redistricting and stuff like that? Would that be what comes from it, or would it just be like future gerrymandering would be prohibited?
The way that it was described, and this is all coming from the podcast Amicus with Dahlia Lithwick, it's run by Slate. The way that it's been described is that the justices, specifically Kennedy, are looking for a formula. Prove to me that there's gerrymandering, and apparently there's a couple of professors at some school in the Northwest. I think they're the Northeast, somewhere up north. They basically came up with a formula to calculate sort of excess votes. If you've got a bunch of Democrats all clustered together, how many excess votes are there that they didn't actually need as a way to sort of point towards political gerrymandering? Because the issue had always been, well, how can you prove that this is politically gerrymandered? Maybe this is just how it naturally makes sense to gerrymander. So it would be a running districts through a formula. And if it exceeds, X amount or X percent of unnecessary votes, just winning in ridiculously landslide victories, the district would be looked at to see if it is politically gerrymandered. And if it does not pass the test of the formula, or if it doesn't pass the test of the formula, and then there's enough background and context to say that this is a politically gerrymandered district that needs to be undone, then that would have to be redistricted, assuming the case gets heard and assuming that I'm not colossally messing up the actual premise of the case.
Well, I'm sure they'll forget about this episode before that comes around.
All right.
You also had some stuff on Venezuela you wanted to hit on.
Yeah. So just looking at what's been going on in Venezuela recently, there was an article in The Atlantic that really struck my fancy about Ms. Luisa Ortega, and also about the Venezuelan military, and just kind of a broad overview. Luisa Ortega was a prosecutor for the government, and she was a noted Chavista, was a big believer in the things that Chavez was doing and a lot of the ways that he did things. She helped keep political prisoners in custody for long stretches of time because she believed in what Chavez was doing. But now she's begun to flip her script a little bit And she has refused, as a prosecutor for the government, to prosecute these protesters that are going on. And so, the military has just been engaging in military tribunals and arresting, trying, and then carrying out sentencing for protesters in the span of a day, and just hundreds of them at once. So she is saying that she is going to try to stand up to Maduro, stand up to the things that he's doing. So she's turned her back on what's going on now. So she's kind of become a prominent opposition figure. At the same time, apparently the military is starting to get really restless. One, apparently, due to some odd circumstances, the military holds sway over public food operations. And a lot of the officers and the higher ups of the military are using that as a way to skim off the top to line their own pockets. And they're starting to feel the pinch from that as there's less food. And also, I mean, some of your rank and file are feeling the crunch of the immense shortages that they're having. So the military is getting rather restless about what's going on too. So, I mean, you've got elements within the government that are pushing back against Maduro, and you've got the military itself, which in Latin America has an interesting history of sort of being an independent entity, also growing restless. So who knows what will happen? It looks to be some pretty interesting developments potentially within the next few weeks.
I'm sure we'll be touching on that at least in the next episode, probably further, considering they've been on every episode since we started.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so UK elections. This is a little bit bigger. It's the UK elections are next Thursday.
Yeah.
Local time. So I'm assuming we'll be talking about it next week easily, since this is the middle of the week. But there's reports came out. I think the article came out last night on the Independent. The poll from Survation. It's something for the Mail. Basically said that the Conservatives only had a 1-point lead, so the Tories are only 1 point ahead of the Labour Party, which I believe 2 weeks ago
they had like a 40-point one, didn't they?
Yeah. Now keep in
That's
mind,
impressive.
This is just one poll. You have Comres putting the Tories at 47% over the Labour Party's 35%, which is still a significant cut. The Observer has the Tories at 43%, Labour at 37%. So, but either way, Labour Party has cut this lead down significantly. All on top of, I mean, there's articles out this week saying Theresa May is a mole for the U.S. against the EU, apparently, or that's how she's being viewed. I'm not sure how that matters because they're not in the EU, but apparently she's being viewed as some kind of mole for the U.S. All stemming from her holding hands with Trump as she's walking from some meeting.
Some type of Peter Pettigrew monster.
But then today, an article came out. I'm not sure. I can't remember where I read it, but you read it also, about her wanting to regulate the internet in lieu of these most recent attacks in London.
Yeah, she had said that I think it was WhatsApp or Messenger, basically that the internet provided a safe space for extremist ideology. And she said that the internet needs to be regulated more aggressively and that telecoms aren't doing enough to regulate the internet to prevent these people that adhere to extremist ideologies from communicating with one another and assisting the government. And at the same time that Britain is too tolerant of extremist ideologies, which I think there's this odd sort of cognitive dissonance in the world where you get things like the Snowden revelations and Verizon and telecoms coming out and be like, oh yeah, we're totally giving your information to the government, but they are also at the same time not assisting the government enough. It's very interesting.
Yeah, well, you do know why? Because it's a very difficult task to regulate the internet. You're talking about so much information. You're just not going to catch everything. And they're using WhatsApp right now. So you start regulating that and screening everything through some kind of program to catch keywords. They're just going to move to something. There's always going to be somewhere else. It just shows your ignorance of actually what's happening and how this technology works for you to come out and say we have to regulate it.
What I find even more frustrating is that, just to use a really shitty analogy, imagine if you're walking down the street and a guy walks up to you and starts beating the shit out of you with a big stick. And he beats the shit out of you and he runs off and someone goes, whoa, we shouldn't let people have sticks. That's crazy. The bigger concern isn't the fact that the dude has a stick.
Our gubernatorial candidate, Northam.
Yeah,
Yeah, like him saying that 43% of
Stupid
women
fucking-
that are killed with gun violence, it happens domestically, so you can't separate the issues.
Yeah,
Good,
that
good,
100%
good
makes
argument
sense.
there.
Yeah, and like I don't dislike Ralph Northam. You know, he said some things that I like, and like I know he's been like pushing the. I know that we're getting way off topic and getting into the Virginia gubernatorial race, but you know he's been really pushing the pro-choice angle hard, which fine. You know, that's really cool. I don't dislike that at all, but like, good God, what a shitty argument. But anyway, but it's frustrating because she thinks the bigger concern is the medium by which something occurs, not the reason for its occurrence. You can change the medium all you want. You can say, oh, those people shouldn't have fucking sticks, and then they'll just pick up something else and beat the crap out of you. They'll use a different tool to get what they want done. You're combating how a symptom moves and spreads. You're not actually combating the symptom or the problem.
I don't see that as a shitty analogy. I mean, they banned firearms over there, so people use knives and vehicles to commit attacks. Yeah. Like it's one of those things. Like, it's scary and nobody wants to accept it, but at a certain point, there's only so far you can get away from acts of violence. If somebody wants to commit something like this, it's hard to stop them. You want to live in a society where the government's going to stop every attack before it happens, but it's just not the case. And I'd argue that maybe you don't want to live in that society because it's going to be a whole lot rougher than you think it is.
Yeah. You know what's an interesting side note? Like, I know that we steered away from Manchester and we're steering away from this with regards to details and analysis and speculation and crap like that. But an interesting thing that I only read in one place, so I'm not sure of too much of its legitimacy, but they said the guys that did the attack had on fake suicide vests, which is interesting. I don't know if that is the case, why they would do that.
Maybe I don't know.
I don't know. It's just assuming that they were right in that reporting. There were 10,000 different things that came out of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't. That's why we're steering away from London and really Afghanistan too. Kramer has a small little snippet about it, but we're not. That's just not where we're gonna go into.
Yeah.
Let's move away from the UK elections, which was not spent mostly on the UK elections.
That was actually spent on the opposite of elections, more destruction.
It's okay. We're going to talk about the elections next week. Hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully, I'm kind of seeing why the slant is moving towards Corbyn now, considering how much we just railed on.
They feel like all Corbyn has to do is not talk. If he can just avoid media as much as possible and not say something dumb.
But talking is exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to debate and be in front of the camera.
And she's refused to debate at all. She won't even how much of a prick are you that you can't even defend your ideas from criticism?
From my understanding, it was almost just like she had the lead. She had it so handily that she just didn't think she needed to, and apparently that's changing quickly.
There's an analogy for Wisconsin in here from the 2016 presidential race and Hillary Clinton that I'm seeing.
Well, speaking of the president, Comey is going to testify in front of the Senate committee Thursday at 10 a.m. local time, which is our time. Let's see. From what I understand, he's supposed to speak almost exclusively on these allegations that Trump asked him to pressured him to end this investigation, basically trying to prove if there's any kind of obstruction of justice. But yeah, this could be one of those things that could be like the turning point towards these impeachment talks.
I wonder what Gowdy's, how he's going to respond, because remember last week we talked about how he engaged with Brennan, and I heard their little exchange listening to another podcast or NPR where Brennan was like, he's like, I'm just passing along information. Would you say it's evidence? It's information. It's not my job to determine whether or not it's evidence. I wonder how he's going to tangle with Gowdy.
Then he got into like vernacular. He's like, just because it's not your vernacular doesn't mean it's not my constituents' vernacular. Oh, shut up, you prat. Fucking. But yeah, this is gonna be interesting. I think it's being, because he's gonna 10 a.m. is the public testimony, and then he's gonna go and have a private testimony. So
he is. Oh, cool.
Yeah, at least that's what I read. I don't know how true that is, but I don't see why anybody would lie about it. I heard that on multiple podcasts and news reports, so there's going to be some kind of private testimony. So I don't know how much is going to be said in the public, but this testimony is what everybody's waiting for, from what I understand.
This is exciting. This is almost as exciting as election night.
Is it almost exciting as a free speech rally in Portland? Because that's
Oh, it is. It's really exciting. 3 people have already been arrested. Like they made 3 like preemptive arrests. So
before it even happened.
Yeah. People got arrested before it even formed. It's going on like right now. Like it kind of just started because it's only 3:00 in Portland, and it started at 2:30 Portland time, so 5:30 here.
So it's just the Oath Keepers standing there with their guns on one side and Antifa wearing their whatever Walking Dead police jumpsuits and with PVC pipe
block. Yeah. So just for context, after in the fallout of what happened in Portland last week, the mayor of Portland said that he was going to bar any groups associated with the alt-right from hosting any type of rally. And the ACLU jumped in and said, absolutely not. These people have First Amendment rights, which great. I mean, this is one of the reasons I love the ACLU. I think these people are complete morons, but they do have fundamental constitutional rights that can't be taken away from them. And so they decided they were going to hold this pro-free speech rally. At the same time, they were basically contacting the Oath Keepers, another branch within the alt-right movement, to function as physical security. And emails got leaked on Reddit where they were going over the gun laws and where you can have guns and where you can't have guns. And basically, it's a public park. They're saying you can't have guns in the park or on the sidewalk, but retired police personnel are legally allowed to carry guns on the sidewalk. Due to some law that they passed. At the same time, Antifa decided they were going to start a counter rally. So fully expect it to get violent if it's anything like Berkeley. But it looks like it's going to be stupid all the way around.
Yeah, how violent? I don't know that it's going to get that violent, considering, I mean, the Oath Keepers, from what I've seen, they don't show up. They don't show up with signs. They show up with guns, and they just, I don't know. I'm not for the Oath Keepers, but they stand there. They're very much like they act as security. They're not there to protest, even though they are.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. I don't know how. It depends on how riled up these Antifa people are, because they're going against people with firearms. They're not going against people with rocks.
And for once, I'll side with the alt-right and the Oath Keepers here. They've established that they want to have a rally. I think the timing is poor, and I think the subtext of what they're doing is incredibly poor and in exceptionally bad taste. But I'll side with them right now if something breaks off, because they wanted to have a rally and Antifa wants to show up and agitate. And I fully expect Antifa will agitate.
Oh, yeah.
And it's Jesus God, I hate both of these groups so much. And I was really hoping after like the 3rd or 4th big wind up at Berkeley, everybody would be like, okay, we got that out of our system and let's go back to the internet. But they don't. They do this in Portland.
Oh, you have to resist. You have to resist.
Because... You know what's really funny is they've got the Portland's motto is keep Portland weird. And I think it is so much an example of, and Jesus God, I sound like I should be writing for the Weekly Standard right now, or the National Review or something, but it is, I feel like it is so emblematic of sort of the left's concept of what odd is or what free speech is, that, well, yeah, we want to keep Portland weird and we want to have all these different ideas. Whoa, holy crap, you're a right-wing populist? That's crazy. You shouldn't be allowed to talk. I'm like, good God, I don't like them either, but you make yourself look really, really bad, progressive wing of America.
Well, yeah, but now they're attacking their own, right? I mean, that's we're going to write a whole, we want to write a whole blog post on some of the stuff going on campuses with this. But we're not going to get into that because we're 20 minutes in, I'm cutting updates off.
Yeah.
So it's so like we said, we're not getting into the details or speculation for these attacks this week in Afghanistan and in London last night.
Iraq and
Right. But you did have a little something that we both kind of agreed to talk about a little bit regarding Ramadan and stuff like that. Yeah,
it's I'm not sure if Ramadan is done yet. I don't know Muslim holidays that well, but with the attack that was conducted in Iraq. It was done right after sundown, when you can break your fast.
Right.
And it was
It's
just
not
done
done.
with the purpose of,
Ramadan's not done till the 24th. It's about a month.
yeah,
I don't remember when
yeah.
it
And
started.
it was just designed to hurt as many people and innocent people as possible. It's just fucking disgusting. But the only thing I want to say about it is that it's Ramadan, and ISIS is big into takfir, which is the process of excommunicating apostates, or the kuffar. And I think I just think that particular relevance. They're picking, Islam's holiest celebration, or a time that is of mass significance to them, to engage in an upswing in terrorist attack. That's my only thought, and that's the only thing I want to say in reference to it all.
Sums up both our attitudes. It's just disgusting, cowardly attacks. Especially the stuff happening in the Middle East, or that stuff's barely being touched on. It's hard to find a whole lot of information. Stuff in London is still so new, and the UK doesn't release that much information. There's stuff out there if you want to look into it, but it's not something we want to politicize on here.
And also, we're not counterterrorism experts, so we would just kind of look like assholes.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Good point. Now let's move to this stuff.
This
going
menagerie
on.
of topics.
yes. We're just this up and down slope. But the Paris mayor Anne Hidalgo is calling for a ban for a black. He's calling for a ban of a Black Feminist festival in the capital that would prohibit white people in certain areas. I'm going to talk about this part because there's 3 sections in this festival. That one would be for all races and genders. There was another one that they could refer to it as non-mixed in the article.
Oh my god, are people talking about racial purity?
Yeah. Well, according to this, in the English version of the article that they're reporting on, it's called reserved. They changed but when you actually translate it directly, it says non-mixed in French. So there's one for non-mixed people, meaning only black, African citizens of France, Paris. And then there's one for non-mixed females, so only for black females. Anyway, in response to this, the mayor has obviously called for this to be banned. There's multiple anti-racism and anti-Semitism groups coming out against it. So this has all been organized by a collective called the Mwasi, MWASI. They're calling the outcry, they're calling it fake news, and saying that these anti-racism and anti-Semitism groups are being tricked by the government. But yeah, and then I told you about this. Like last year, they had the same group tried to set up a decolonization summer camp for victims. Is a training seminar on anti-racism reserved for victims of institutional racism or radicalized minorities. That also excluded white people. They said it drew similar outcry. I don't know if it actually was banned or not, but yeah. So this is what's going on in Paris.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got initial gut reactions to this that really run the spectrum of, one, this is really dumb. I think it's incredibly stupid. Like, part of me, so last year, so you're hosting a forum for victims of racial discrimination, specifically non-whites. I'm like, okay, that just sounds like some Berkeley College stuff. That just sounds like something you'd get at a college in the United States. So I'm like, you know what? That's fine. Whatever. I don't get the radicalized minority portion of that. I don't know what they're getting at, and I haven't done research into it, so I'll plead ignorance on that. The initial reaction of, well, you know what? I have to remind myself it's not the United States, so these people don't actually have a constitutional protection for free speech like we do. But my first response is, I'm not comfortable with the idea of Paris saying you can't do that. I mean, I'm glad that the members of the community are saying, well, that's racist and stupid. I find it to be very heartening that other members and other groups that may potentially think like they do in the community are saying that's dumb and you shouldn't have this. But I'm iffy about the government saying you can't do it. That's my only hang up. I'm glad that other people are calling them out, but the government saying you can't makes me slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah, I get what you're going at there. I think they just have somewhat similar to some other European states, and even I think Canada. I don't know how Canada would view this. They have weird laws up there that we should probably talk about at some point in the future. But it's mainly these things are set up. The groups, the community groups you refer to that come out and said like these kind of issues shouldn't be viewed in a way where you're segregating people to combat them. It should be like a unifying issue that brings people together. That's like the biggest thing. They're mainly just attacking it because if you allow something like this, then you start allowing places where they can keep Jews out or Islamic people out or black people out. Like people, I feel like that's the biggest thing is people try, and we talked about this last week at Evergreen State College. Like if you think it's okay for you to do this and segregate a group out, then you realize that it can be reversed onto you, right?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest issues, and one reason that I dislike when people abuse the phrase fascism is fascism is about a loss of identity. You lose the identity that you have racially, ethnically, religiously, sexual orientation, socioeconomic association.
Calling this fascism.
Oh no! But I'm kind of getting at something different. Is that the veins of right-wing populism that we see in France, in the United States, in the Netherlands, places like that, they are the epitome of identity politics. And for me, what these people are doing, the Malawi or whatever they are engaging in a more and more aggressive forms of identity that got picked up by the left. during 1960s and 70s for just causes, for good reasons, because there were issues that were ignored in these countries that were based solely around identity. Identity as a woman, identity as an ethnic minority, identity as a minority with regards to sexual orientation. But I think the problem is that they have run full circle with it, and the right has embraced identity politics, and that just reaffirms the left's identity politics, and you have this constant escalation. So that, I don't think 10 years ago you would have seen anything remotely close to some of the things that they're calling for in Washington or this rally in France, because there wasn't the escalation of identity politics to the level that it is now, but it just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed so that your identity ceases to be a member of a particular nation first or to a particular party. And it kind of goes back to the conversation we had the other week about how you view everything through one particular lens, especially with identity politics, and everything gets run through that one filter, and you only view yourself as a political actor for that sole cause. And this is, I think, the danger and the escalation, because when we see these things from the left, honestly, they seem benign, but when we see them from the right, that sort of antagonizes the left a little bit more. I think it makes us a little more aware. And I know that sounds sort of like saying, oh, the right is worse about it, but I think the way they express them are slightly different, and it's creating the embracing of identity politics by the right has almost weaponized to a degree the identity politics of the left. I don't know. I just pulled that out of my ass, so I might be completely wrong.
I've heard that argument before. Usually it's coming from somebody on the left trying to defend the actions of people that are also in their political ideology and the actions they do. But
yeah, we have to escalate because they escalated.
Yeah, essentially. But yeah, this is just something that I just wanted to bring that up because it was something I read literally right after we finished the show last week. But we're gonna stay in France because Macron met with Putin this week, and I wouldn't say it was hostile, but it was definitely tense with some of his statements.
Seemed a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, but I guess I should start with they discussed Syria and how they didn't want to have it fall into a failed state status.
It
So-
hasn't already. My God, they're optimistic.
But essentially, Macron wants to work with Putin to aid Syria, help Syria, and the refugee crisis. I'm assuming is what they were referring to with that. But in front of Putin, he called out Sputnik and RT, calling them lying propaganda publications. He said any use of chemical weapons in Syria is a red line that would be met with reprisals and immediate consequences. They didn't really say what the consequences were. And then he also
Everyone's super vague about that.
Yeah, he also called out.
What's going on in Chechnya? Was it?
Yeah,
With
the LGBT
killing
rights.
all the gay people.
I keep trying to speak and read at the same time, but he vowed to be vigilant there in the Russian Republic of Chechnya. And when you watch some of the stuff, you just see Putin sitting there, just kind of like, I can't wait to get the fuck out of here.
I'm gonna hack your
The best is when he calls
hard.
when he calls out Russia Today and Sputnik, and Putin's just standing right there next to him, like fiddling with papers.
Oh man, I put that in here somewhere. Oh shoot, what is it? Oh darn, it is around here.
I definitely liked what he was saying, and I think most of
How
Europe
ballsy.
did, considering he's like the poster boy of the EU right now. Everybody loves him. Angela Merkel all of a sudden has got a little bit more gumption. She's speaking out a little bit more.
Yeah, well, when you were the only thing standing between, Russia and the collapse of the European Union, and you finally have somebody else that's like, hey, we should get a little bit closer.
She's always been, I wouldn't say like ridiculously soft, but she was never really hard on Russia.
Yeah.
I think that might
I
change
think-
now that she has somebody backing her up.
Yeah, I think a couple of things, just to kind of do a segue into this. I think a couple things about that are kind of interesting. I mean, she's been winning. They had 3 state elections, and she knocked it out of the park with Christian Democratic Union victories through those, and in places they weren't expected to win or win by nearly as much. But I know that she's been pushed, from everything I've read, she's been pushed a little to the right on immigration because they've got Alternative for Deutschland, and they were really worried about Geert Wilders and really worried about Marine Le Pen. So she made this kind of rightward shift a little bit, especially on immigration, to balance that out. And I think with Geert Wilders not doing well, I mean, he gained some seats, with Macron winning, and Macron early polls show that En Marche, Macron's political party, might get an absolute majority in the French legislature, which would be kind of a big deal. That I think when she gets through this election cycle, if she gets what she needs and she stays in power and solidifies control a little bit more, that she'll just become an even bigger internationalist and pro-European Union person. And you know what? I never thought that I would say anything too much positive about Donald Trump, but Dan Carlin said something after the election. He's like, sometimes good things happen out of the result of bad things because we just become so aware. And if the election of Donald Trump and our pulling out for the international scene the way we are makes a stronger France and Germany, I mean, that's pretty good.
I'm not gonna argue with that. I'm interested to see where this all goes. I mean, this is a pretty good start, considering this guy was basically what's the word I'm looking for? There wasn't a better choice. He was the alternative. He's all they had. So I think he's doing. I wouldn't say he's doing a very a good job, but he's doing the best you could have hoped for. And France's legislative election runs from June 11th to June 18th. So I mean, they're coming up really soon too. Right. Yeah, I think we touched on that when we were talking about the actual elections, because this is when we were worrying over whether or not Le Pen was gonna pull this out.
Yeah, so we'll have to keep an eye on that too. We got a lot of international elections coming up.
Well, once the UK elections are over, then we'll have the
French, German.
Yeah. Well, Germany's not till September, so we'll have a little bit of a breather. But I'm sure there'll be countless other Trump news blurbs to speak about.
Yeah.
We're not going into Trump. That would have been a perfect segue if we were going into talking about Trump. But we're not.
Darn it.
We're going into Sean Hannity, because you have some stuff to say about this.
I think it's just mostly
idiot.
bile to spew.
Well, yeah. That's why I said you had something to say about this idiot.
Yeah, I mean, he's picked up this fucking Seth Rich football of this stupid story.
Has he been fired yet? That's the big thing.
No, but he's lost a ton of broadcaster. I mean, sorry, a ton of advertisers. I mean, it's like when we watched Bill O'Reilly go down the toilet, he was just losing advertisers like crazy. And then everybody's been trying to shore up the Bill O'Reilly gap, and Tucker Carlson's been doing okay, but he's still not doing great. And now Sean Hannity's picked up the Seth Rich football and just run with it off a fucking cliff. And he's just pulling the, I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions. But I don't know. For me, Sean Hannity is kind of representative of the arc of Fox News as a whole. And I was thinking about it, and I'd read a couple things about Fox News. And I mean, Fox News was only started in the 90s, and like the Fair and Balanced, even Roger Ailes knew that was like a tongue-in-cheek. They were so conservative that he will say they were balancing out the media. They were evening the scales out because the rest of the media was, had a moderate liberal bias, so they wanted to be conservative. But I mean, Fox came at the start of the culture wars, the defending of our Judeo-Christian values, as we used to call them, and now we'll call it our Western values, or defending Western civilization. And I mean, they had people like Sean Hannity. I mean, people like Pat Buchanan were featured on there, people like Bill O'Reilly, and they always had these undertones of populism behind it. Always had this anti-elitist, very pragmatic quality to them. And it's weird just watching everything fall in place. And now we have the Fox News that we have today, where Sean Hannity is saying the DNC is responsible for murdering people. It's absolutely crazy that this is a news source. I mean, they're going down in the ratings.
They're not defending him. They're all kind of slowly turning on him. That's the thing that strikes me the most. It'd be one thing if he was pushing this conspiracy and just asking the questions, and he had the support of the members of his network. But
that's like what Moynihan said. Like, everybody thinks he's a joke there.
Yeah, so that's what I said. Is he fired yet? I don't like. How much longer are they going to keep wasting airtime with somebody that's essentially? I mean, he may not be losing them money yet, but at some point he's going to. If enough advertisers pull out, then what are they gonna do? They're not gonna keep putting them on the air.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. I was doing some reading about Rupert Murdoch's sons that have taken over the Fox News, and they really, really don't like the label and the brand that Fox News is right now. They hated Bill O'Reilly. They don't like Sean Hannity, and they kind of want to be a more respected news organization. And
good luck.
It's really interesting watching this shift where you're getting people like Tucker Carlson. I mean, Tucker Carlson is a little more even keel than Bill O'Reilly was. He is not a complete moron. He does make legitimate points. He argues very, very well. I don't agree with him on a bunch of things, but he is at least more respectable. And it's interesting. It's not a purge necessarily. I don't want to call it a purge, but it seems like you know how when dogwoods blossom and when they bloom beautifully for like 2 weeks and then they just die. That's what I feel like this is. I feel like it's been the slow blooming of all these Fox News personalities, and we're just watching this odd transition between one life cycle of Fox and the next. It's very strange because watching them going through such an awkward transition that they have to be aware of is so strange, because it's like Sean Hannity's like, I got to get all the weird out of my system now.
Yeah.
Like Jason Chaffetz is like leaving Congress to go take a post at Fox. Like, I have no clue what's happening over there.
I don't know how that's gonna turn out, but good luck. But yeah, I don't see how much longer they can keep him around, or why. If that's the case, if they're trying to have this shift to be more respectable, then why would you keep somebody around that, at the very least, is speaking on a topic that he has no evidence of and has been asked repeatedly to stop by the members of the victim's family?
Yeah.
They discredit everything he says, but he keeps going with it because he with this like guise that he's fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
Sort of speak.
You know what's interesting? I gained a touch of respect for Glenn Beck because he's come out in recent months, and I'm sure you've seen it before. He did an interview with Michael Moynihan on Vice News where he was like, I'm really, really sorry for my contribution to the wacky world that is modern politics. He's like, my time at Fox, he's like, I thought I was doing good things, but I did some really, really bad things. I did some long-term damage, in my opinion, to the political climate, especially the political climate on the right. And he's like, I have a huge burden to bear for the way things are, because I enabled people like Sean Hannity to get more and more populist. He's like, I enabled a lot of the thinking that people have, and I'm sorry for that. So I mean, that was actually, it's really interesting to have someone who was this Hannity-esque figure, who was this Hannity-esque, like, ribald, insane, so convinced of their own rightness that, like, the other people just don't get it, for him to take a step back and have this lucidity and go, oh, that's what I was doing.
Or he just really wants you to come check out the Blaze. One of the two.
Blaze.
But yeah. This has been going on for quite a while now, so it was about time we touched on this. Hopefully we'll have an update soon saying that he's been fired and we can put an end to this nonsense being displayed as real news. But we're gonna move on because I have nothing else to add to that. Unless
that was just a bit of a ranting about how
I love
weird
when we
Sean
talked
Hannity
about it at
is.
the beginning. You said you weren't sure what you were gonna say, and then you went on for 10 minutes. So this week we had the revelation. I'll call it a revelation. That the former UKIP leader Nigel Farage has been named as a person of interest in the FBI's investigation. Is it? I guess it's still the FBI's investigation, even though they have a special.
Yeah.
So, he's been named as a person of interest, not because they think he's done anything illegal. From what I can understand, it's just that he has associations with members of Trump's campaign and the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. I'm not sure how much is actually here. It's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, from what I read, it seemed the same way too. I think it was an FBI agent spoke on some condition of anonymity, and he was like, basically, when you look at all these people, when you look at WikiLeaks, the entire organization, Julian Assange, when you look at the Trump campaign, when you look at Russia, he's like the person that we keep seeing come up oddly is Nigel Farage, and Nigel Farage is apparently rather close with Roger Stone, and has had plenty of contact with him and with Julian Assange, and we know that Julian Assange hated Hillary Clinton, just massively so. And Gussifer 2.0, the Russian hacker
that's the
Stone had contacts with.
That's like the theory that WikiLeaks was working with the Russians in some capacity to take down Hillary Clinton. Yeah. I mean, if anything, it just seemed to me like he's a person of interest because I see him almost like a middleman, but like between the communications.
I bet that he's just unfortunately caught up with some people and he has absolutely no clue what's going on.
I mean, I'd agree with you. He probably doesn't have anything. He has no idea what's going on, but that doesn't matter. He at least he had to have something. At least, at the very least, what they believe is he has information on certain acts that happened that they're trying to investigate. So we'll see. I'm sure we'll have updates on this sometime in the near future. Even though it never seems to get updates on these specifics, it just seems to be like a blurb, and then you don't hear about it for 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, and I know that we touched on it before, but needed to touch on it again. Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, is also being looked at as someone who is involved with the Russia links. So basically, he just came out and said, I had nothing to do with it. Everyone said, oh, you're just being looked at, and that's more or less all that I know on it.
Well,
and apparently he is just murder to deal with on with the press. Like apparently, like the Daily Beast got up with him, and he was like, "You need to stop calling my candidate." He was like, "I will take you for what little money you have left. You are worthless. You're a shit journalistic institution. Fuck off." And he's apparently a super friendly guy.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
So let's get into. Well, I won't say the biggest story, but one of the big stories that we have just on content we want to talk about is Trump. Yeah, so Trump pulled out of the Paris Accords, which I don't think. See, people seem to be really surprised about it, but everything he's said and done since ever would allude to the fact that this is what he was gonna do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the biggest. I mean, there's just outcry from just millions of people and businesses and world leaders.
The world's literally going to end in the next 30 days.
It's over. We're all going to die. Even though and I'm gonna like people. Nobody wants to talk about this. Well, I won't say nobody. There's plenty of educated people talking this point. The U.S. is still on track to meet every goal that was set by Obama. Like,
we're the world leaders. We didn't even sign Montreal or Kyoto, and we're still doing a fucking bang up job.
Well, yeah, and then you have 187 mayors as of this morning have vowed to keep with the climate accords. The biggest thing to me, like, I was never for us pulling out, but there is also the thing, like, right now, the agreement doesn't require any kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no legislative body that's making sure these countries are keeping.
Yeah, it's a goodwill thing. It's like, hey, dudes, let's all try our best.
Now, but once you sign it, there's always the chance that they could change the agreement somewhere down the line to be more restrictive and confining. Yeah. So there's that. I'd be more worried, like everybody else, when I first heard it. I was like, oh my God, why would you do this? In reality, this was an easy win for Trump. He could have just signed it, but I mean, the biggest thing, I believe McCain touched on this week, basically saying like he was for staying in it, but he said Obama messed up. This isn't a direct quote. Basically, Obama messed up when he didn't submit this to Congress.
Yeah.
To be approved, and that basically allowed Trump to reverse and pull out. So there's that. The only real consequence I see is the EU leaders are all railing against Trump. I mean, we're one of 3 countries. One of, like, Nicaragua, which literally couldn't afford to do any of this stuff anyway. And what was the other one? Syria?
Syria. They have a good excuse, though. They're a failed state.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, Elon Musk left the advisory council in protest.
I've got a bunch of different feelings about this. So my initial thought with the Paris deal, I'm not that worried about us pulling out of Paris with regards to the environment. We're still on track to do our part, and I'm not worried about that. I think we're going to continue to do it without signing any major international agreements. We have reduced our carbon emissions, and we have done really, really well with this, more than anybody else. So I'm not particularly worried about that. I mean, that was under Bush and Obama, and Bush was no fan of the environment. But
they're all fans of money, and all of this is like the economy is growing because of green energy. Unfortunately, a lot of it is growing from fracking, which has its own set of consequences that I don't want to get into.
Yeah, we don't have time for that. Yeah. Well, that'll be a whole topic when we have like proper topics. But for me, I think we should have stayed in the Paris deal for political reasons, and I think it's just because like our image looks bad internationally right now, whether it's justified or not, whether we deserve the flack that we're getting. I don't want to argue that. We don't look very good, and I think it would have been a big act of goodwill to say, "Hey, gang, look, we're still in it together," for us to stay. With regards to states and businesses working with countries, this is where I start to get a little iffy. If states are just saying, hey, we'll stick with the plan, the non-binding agreement that doesn't require us to contribute any money or anything like that, I'm totally on board with that.
It's not even states. To me, it looked like individual cities. You had mayors.
Yeah, there were some cities, but like I feel weird about Jerry Brown going to China because I feel very strange about states subverting the federal government and doing what they want. Now I understand he's going there to just reaffirm, hey, like we're still behind you, gang. Like, yeah, go environment. We're California. That's cool. I got no problem with that. But if it extends any farther than that, if states or individual cities try to engage with foreign countries or with the European Union, I'm really not comfortable with that. I mean, that was a big component of the Civil War. The Articles of the Confederation were so weak that individual states tried to strike deals. I mean, if this were a trade deal, if the U.S. backed out of a trade deal and Jerry Brown went to China and he was like, hey, well, let's talk about this whole trade thing, we'd be kind of iffy about that. We'd be a little like, that's not your role. And I'm not saying that this is a circumstance like that, but it's something that gets me a little wary. But with Elon, also with the final point, Elon Musk left the advisory council. I see both sides. Some people are like, you should have stayed and fought the good fight. But I also get like, hey, I need everybody to know this shit is crazy and I'm out. It's the protest leaving.
Yeah, I mean, it's his own choice. I don't ever really understand why he was there in the first place. It seemed, especially
Government funding? I don't know.
This is probably something. Oh yeah, there's that. But this is probably something that was a long time coming. From everything I've seen, for the most part, he was being advised not to pull out, and it. God, I keep saying pull out. But he was
14.
He was advised not to leave the Paris Accords, and he did it anyway. Basically, to me, and this isn't even like my own thought. This has been said quite a few times. The president's going to do what he originally thought he should do. He just kind of takes in suggestions just so he can say that he took in suggestions. So
good point. Good point. I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's exactly what it is in the grand scheme of things. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think it's that bad. I didn't really give much thought into these mayors working with it, because it's not. I wouldn't say that these representatives are going to countries in the EU to do it. They're basically just saying that they'll keep up their pledge to do this, which is fine. They're keeping up their pledge for this green energy initiative, and it's one of those things that's inevitable when you have like natural gas and solar power and wind power. These are all growing industries.
Nuclear.
These are all growing industries that, and like coal's dying. He can open up. We're gonna talk about it later. He can open up these coal mines, but it's not going to do anything because there's not going to be if you can't sell the coal, then what's the point of keeping the mine open?
Yeah.
So
what pissed me off the most is I listened live on NPR to the speech that he gave. I was driving back from work. I listened to Mike Pence's introduction, and Mike Pence went on about what a great success the trip overseas was. We reaffirmed, we renewed old alliances, and we formed new alliances. What a great success. And I was like, Jesus Christ, it's like we live in two different worlds. But then Trump gets up, and it's like you can tell when he goes off script, because he'll like say sentences like an adult, like someone who has some rough familiarity with grammar and syntax and such. And then he starts talking about, he's like, we're going to be opening up coal plants in West Virginia. Beautiful coal, great coal, clean coal. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, those are two. That's like freezer. It's such an oxymoron. You know, that you're going to have clean coal. But did you hear when he talked about pulling out, he was criticizing the fact that in the agreement, China and India and some of these developing countries are allowed to continue to use coal. And for me, any rudimentary understanding of sort of economies of scale and industrialization indicates that they need to use these things, and we're trying to help them get through that phase as quickly as possible. But he also said that the agreement was more or less an international economic conspiracy to undermine the United States economy because they want to slow us down. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, this man got and said this in front of like people that record these things and then report them as the news. You just said that there's an international economic conspiracy to undermine the United States growth. Yeah. And he also predicted 3 to 4% of economic growth in the coming year too. So he upped it from just 3% that he predicted in the budget to potentially 4%.
Yeah, I'm just hoping for an 8-month term with this fucking idiot.
Yeah, I hope comes out and he's like, I've got an 8mm reel of him offering me hard drugs, stabbing a prostitute, and then trying to get me to drop the investigation. And we're like, sweet. Now we just have to worry about Mr. Pence.
Yeah. Well, we can find something. We can find something on all of these people.
Just every single thing about him.
Let's just have a special election and find somebody else. Yeah, we just talked about Sean Hannity speaking with no evidence, and we have the president of the United States getting in front of everybody and going, you know what? They're trying to keep us down with their green laws and such, making us make pledges and shit that we can just choose the percentage that we want. What? How are they trying to?
This is my corner of the earth, and I'll pollute it all.
They're asking you to pick your own pledge for what you want to get to by 2030. How is that keeping you? Pick your own. God, he's such a whatever.
It's like calling. You know how PBS does the pledge drives? It's like calling them and going, "How dare you ask for money? $100 from me?" It's like, "Oh no, you can give $5. How dare you ask for $100, sir? You can pick your pledge."
It's just,
but you know, this all points to, one, a good segue that I'm about to make, but two, a failure of the adults in the room, of the moderating influence, and with some of the staff changes and some of the people that Trump's talking about bringing back, a push towards the old campaign Trump and sort of a resurgence of the Bannonites, as it were. Because he's talking about bringing back Corey Lewandowski and Dave Bossy in non-White House roles. Like, they were campaign managers that worked with him when he was running. And Corey Lewandowski is known because he's the guy that bruised the Breitbart reporter that Ben Shapiro stood up for, and it caused the whole thing. And that's why Ben Shapiro quit Breitbart. And he was fired from the campaign after that. But he and Dave Bossy are potentially coming back to function as crisis managers. And they aren't going to be in the White House exactly. According to Trump aides, that will be a train wreck, and some of them, quote, physically gagged at the concept of him coming back. So basically, they're just going to potentially come back to work outside of the White House and be paid to do crisis management. So when Trump says or tweets weird things, they can handle it. So between that and some of the other stuff they're doing, I mean, Spicer's starting to take a backseat with regards to being on camera. So
they have to be paid well for some of the dumb shit this man tweets.
I know.
But I like how you you skipped over the ethic waivers. We're just going to talk about staff changes.
Well, we can jump back to that too, because
we're gonna have
come
to.
back.
We're gonna have to jump back. Messing up my flow, but you did a segue.
I got these in alphabetical order. One says White House grants, and the other says White House staff.
We have, so I mean, you touched on some of the people he's bringing back, but we have, what's Mike Dubka? I don't know how to say this guy's name, but yeah, he was the communications director. He quit when Trump came back, which was reported with a lot of times they reported it without saying, like, this was already known, like he was.
Yeah, it's like May 18th is when he formally resigned.
Yeah, so this was expected, and you've talked about it before, Sean Spicer taking his step back.
Yeah, which is weird because Dubka, historically, as like the director of communications or whatever his position was, he's above the press secretary, but the White House was like, nah, we're going to switch that around. And they put Spicer above him as press secretary. So Spicer's technically taking a smaller role, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to be doing more of the televised stuff. And because apparently people like her, I guess when she spins the president's odd bullshit, it comes out nicer and sweeter. So
yeah, bullshit.
They like it a little bit better.
Give her a shot. Hit her with a Covfefe tweet.
Covfefe. Okay, so that's what I know. We're not talking about Covfefe in and of itself. We're talking about Sean Spicer's defense of Covfefe, or Kofifi, or however the hell you pronounce it.
There's no pronunciation because it's not a word.
We're just gonna, every time we go to say it, we should just input like a 1.5 second pause.
It's like GIF or GIF or whatever you want to pronounce. It's not a word. Just fuck it.
It's like Prince's symbol. I don't know what it is. It's that sound of shing, whatever. So all Sean Spicer had to do with the bad tweet, the typo that the president had, was just laugh it off and go, yeah, shouldn't tweet after midnight, and then you could make a Gremlins joke or something like that. Instead, the man says, oh no, the president knew what it said. It made sense. And then everyone's like, well, what the hell was it supposed to mean? And he's like, oh, well, I really can't get into it. And that's a perfect example of why Sean Spicer needs to not ever speak to anyone with a recording device, a pencil, a stone and chisel, just ever again.
Yeah.
Man, is such an idiot.
He's just one of those people that his first thought isn't to laugh something off, it's to defend. And when you're constantly
Are you talking about me?
When you're trying to constantly defend somebody that is really indefensible, like, you can't defend Trump on half the shit he says. Trump is he's a geriatric that's spewing nonsense and playing golf 99% of the time.
Trump's. You know how when old people get Facebook for the first time, Trump's the human incarnation of a 55-year-old woman that just got Facebook and shares a lot of stuff from like whatever those like natural remedy fake news sites are about how vaccinating your kids gives them autism.
He just shares news from Fox and yells about stuff on MSNBC.
Yeah.
But so let's
Speaking
bounce
of
back.
bad news sites, yeah.
What? Oh. we're gonna bounce back into the ethics waivers that were granted this week. 14 of them, to be exact. It's basically, it just said it was like 4 ex-lobbyists, some others who've joined the government, including one for Kellyanne Conway and the other for Steve Bannon, which coincided with an article this week with talking about, it was an ex-Breitbart staff member that was speaking about a concrete paper trail to prove that Steve Bannon is still heavily involved in Breitbart. I don't know if I want to say leading it, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the whole point of his ethics waiver was that he could stay in communication with Breitbart. That was the whole point of it. And Kellyanne's was about, she used to work for some polling company. And they had their ethics waiver for that. But it's funny, in the entire 8 years of Barack Obama, he gave 3 ethics waivers, I think, maybe 8, whatever. It was single digits. And Trump has pushed all these ethics waivers through. And it's really funny. The Office of the General Counsel says, you know what, you can have ethics waivers. It's cool, but don't do them secretly. We kind of want to publicize these and put them on the website. And they wouldn't tell people that they were doing it. And I guess it got leaked. I don't know that they have all these ethics waivers. But the Office of the General Counsel was like, yeah. But I think OGC had to convince them to do it or something like that. I can't remember what it was, because they were like, stop doing this secretly. You kind of have to make people aware that you're granting ethics waivers. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, they're on the website right now, so there's that.
Yeah. That swamp's got to be getting pretty low, so probably start hearing the sound of the fluid sucking around the drain soon.
Well, I mean, he is draining the swamp. I mean, not intentionally. His staff is just telling every secret that passes by. Trump scratched his ass. Someone tell MSNBC, quick. It's just, I
guess he's just dumping large amounts of, like, caustic acid into the swamp to clean it up, like in patches.
Well, no, he's dumping coal waste in there. That was the whole point of repealing that.
That's why we're getting rid of the EPA. We need somewhere to put all the coal dust.
Yeah, so let's take a hard left into some legal matters. Not with us, but with
by the way, we're getting sued.
Not yet. Immigration. We had this week the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project received a cease and desist letter from the DOJ threatening disciplinary action. It was under a law which is supposed to prohibit, I forgot what you said, notaries. Essentially, it was supposed to fight notaries, but it's supposed to stop organizations from taking money from immigrants in exchange for representation, and then the person or the organization just doesn't show up and they take their money, is what it's for. So there was apparently a history of this. Apparently in Spanish, like notary, the equivalent of that in Spanish is someone that actually has a lot of legal authority, and apparently there was a miscommunication, and people basically coming up to to immigrants that were going to immigration court and saying, oh yeah, I'll represent you, just give me a bunch of money. They would take their money and not do anything to help them. So the DOJ kind of thoughtfully passed a law that says, look, if you're going to help these people, you have to file something that's called like something of appearance, basically saying, if I'm helping these people, I'm going to be there every step of the way for every part of it. That way, you legally had to show up. You couldn't just take their money and go. So groups like the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project said, whoa, we don't actually help them every step of the way. We help them during the initial steps of this, and then they get an attorney and go. Do we have to file this, it's like affidavit of appearance or something? And the DOJ said, well, no, you don't. You just need to put in writing on the documents that you submit that you helped prepare everything and that you will no longer be assisting them and everything's cool. And they did that for like 8 years. Right.
And then,
they set up shop. They set up shop. A lot of, it talks about them specifically, but there's also, they refer to them as counterparts around the country, set up shop in airports to help immigrants during the travel ban. And this is one of the organizations that filed suit against the travel ban. But I mean, basically, this all comes from the fact that like immigrants don't have any right to counsel, so they can be detained, put in jail, and then deported without ever seeing a lawyer or being able to do anything. Because they're not citizens if they're here illegally. So I mean, I understand that, but this organization is helping them pro bono find, in a lot of cases, from what I understood, they're finding lawyers to help them free of cost, or at least at some kind of discount. And they're being served.
Yeah,
they're being served this letter telling them to stop. Which, from what I understand, they're the only ones that got this.
Yeah.
But
again, Amicus, Slate's podcast hosted by Dahlia Lithwick, did part of their episode on this, and it was really interesting because they interview the president of the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. And it was really interesting listening to him. He's like, we're just trying to help people out, and we've had this great working relationship with the DOJ for like 8 years, even after they passed this law. And all of a sudden, we're the only people getting singled out, is because he said, he's like, I can't legally say, or I can't with absolute certainty say it's because we filed suit against the travel ban and we helped send out attorneys to the airports. He's like, but it is pretty weird that is the case. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
It's a little ridiculous that they're behaving that way.
I mean, I wanted to touch on, like, this isn't new that this stuff is happening. Not necessarily the letter or this organization, but under the Obama administration, more than 1 million immigrants were detained and deported without any kind of representation. So, like, this stuff's been going on for a while. This is just an organization that's trying to help, and they're being I won't say prosecuted.
Kneecapped.
Yeah, they're being threatened with prosecution for doing it. But so let's move to another
different state, same issue.
Well, not necessarily. Yeah, it is similar. But so a lot of people heard about the Texas bill, or it's a bill. I don't think it's a bill currently. In May, the governor signed it, so that would make it a law, correct?
Yeah,
so
I think that's how it works.
It hasn't been enforced or put into place. I know there's a better word for that, and I'm just being an idiot. But you understand what I'm saying. Like, it hasn't been enforced yet.
We need to rewatch Schoolhouse Rock, because I'm a little rusty on this one too.
But a lot of people heard about this bill because I believe it was last week or the week before. This was the whole thing where you had the Democratic representative, trying to say that he was threatened to be shot, and that whole situation in the Austin courthouse or representatives, wherever it was. I don't know. Did you hear about this?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, it happened. This is
all news to me.
This is where most people came to it, and it was just like a ridiculous he said nonsense, where both of them were being overly dramatic. You had I don't even know their names. You had the Republican representative. He called the immigration police. I forgot what ICE. That is what they said. See, you never saw anything on this. But
yeah, I just know acronyms decently.
But yeah, he called them, and he was kind of joking about it, or just being an asshole about it. And then the Democrats got pissed off, and there were people holding each other back. And apparently, somebody said they were gonna wait outside by his car, and he said, "You can wait outside by my car, but I'm gonna shoot you if you do." It was complete nonsense. It all came from, there were people protesting the law or the bill, and saying, like, they were basically had signs saying they were illegal immigrants and they were proud or something like that. So now that I've roughly, and probably not even close to correctly laid out the backstory, the SB4 is essentially, it allows law enforcement officials to be held accountable for not detaining illegal immigrants. This is to stop sanctuary cities, which I believe Austin is one. But it makes failure to comply with requests to detain an illegal immigrant a Class A misdemeanor, which is punishable by a $4,000 fine or a year in prison. And it also makes it for, like, officials that don't report or follow through with these requests, they can be taken from office. That's just what it starts with. But it also enlists city council members, sheriffs, district and city attorneys, campus police, and wants, like, all of them to report either illegal immigrants or officials not complying with these requests. It encourages citizens to determine those in not following this law. It gives an exception to witnesses and victims of crimes to be questioned about their nationality or immigration status, and promises state attorneys help if legal action comes from this. Like if you were to report somebody and it comes back that they're not here illegally, they try to sue you for something, defamation, I don't know, and they can protect you legally. But I mean, this has been the Austin mayor has said he's going to challenge this law, and MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, is filing lawsuit against it as well. But yeah, I know you didn't really read into this as much, so I kind of had to lay it out for you.
No, that's perfectly fine.
It's pretty fucked up in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, let's just control for something here. Let's control for whether or not it's the issue of complying with immigration requests, because that's a very complicated issue. I know that we talked previously, and a good argument I had heard was it's not the local authorities' job to be the federal government's job. Yeah, that's why we live in a federal republic. There's a separation of powers. There's a specialization of labor. Let's just control for that, and let's talk about some of the ridiculous absurdities that this thing endorses. I mean, first of all, it endorses spying on your neighbors. I mean, that's not to sound too much like I belong on Fox News or something like that. But that's something that, like the communists did in the Soviet Union. It encouraged a Stasi, people to spy on one another, to turn each other in. That's also kind of McCarthy-esque. It just gives the police these broad brush sweeping authorities to stop people and question them about their immigration status or whether or not they're legal citizens, which is kind of crazy. It basically grants immunity to anyone that decides that they want to use this tool or this law as a tool for a witch hunt against someone. It's let's just even controlling for whether or not it's right for local law enforcement agencies to comply with ICE. The ramifications and the protections for the people that engage in it are a little extreme.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, you're talking about, they're going to be on college campuses. They want campus police, I guess, to be watching for, potential students that could be illegal immigrants. I can't imagine.
I just want to know how they're going to do this without racial profiling. What in the hell does an illegal immigrant look like?
Because you just have to have probable cause. So if you're if you're Mexican, or I'm assuming this is mainly focused at Mexicans or Hispanics, but you can't ever be sure. But like I said, they put the exception in where you can ask a victim of a crime or a witness to a crime what their status is.
Hey, I know you just got stabbed, but are you a citizen before I bother to waste my time helping you?
Right. That's the whole point. Is you have to have.
I can't wait for the Supreme Court to hear this in a few years. It'll be great.
You have to have probable cause, and apparently suspicion of being here illegally is enough for probable cause under this law.
It's like the immigration version of stop and frisk. That's just so fucking stupid.
Yeah, like I said, it hasn't been enforced yet, and there's multiple. You have the city challenging it, and there's lawsuits coming at it. You have to imagine this is one of those things. I don't know. But, like I said, there's a law similar to this that is in Arizona right now, than has been for, I don't know how long.
that was like back, I think I was still in high school when that got passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't like...
Because it was the lady governor was then there, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I wouldn't say it's new, but it is only in one other state, from what I understand.
Yeah, but sanctuary cities have just been so prominent recently, and I know that I'm going through like sort of a weird phase. Like, I part of me gets the practicality of saying, look, let's say you get arrested for a Dewey, or you're involved in a robbery or something. To me, part of it isn't unreasonable to question someone's immigration status, but at the same time, how do you do that? One that doesn't have a sort of a racial animus behind it, but also, where do you draw the line? Certainly, there's a practical component to it in places like Arizona and New Mexico, where you do have a lot of illegal immigration, but it brings up so many gray area questions that are really difficult to answer, that when you start to dig into it and you get away from the, oh, well, it's just practical common sense portion, that you just have a lot of questions that are difficult to answer.
Yeah, this is something we'll probably be bringing back up, considering there's lawsuits on it. So wanted to touch on it now. We didn't really I believe
just
it was
prime
before,
the pump for that one.
It was before last week's show, when like the whole issue happened in Austin that I talked about at the beginning, and I didn't really see the point in talking about that, but I wanted to put it on here this week. Last week was like the 2-hour episode that took forever to go through, so we couldn't have fit it in.
Thanks, one listener.
The last one we want to talk about is the Illinois House passes a bill unanimously for automatic voter registration, which is it's not crazy. This is stuff that's in multiple states. The one that makes this different is it has an opt-out policy, so everybody is in it from the get-go unless you opt out, and essentially registers you to vote when you visit government offices, pay your taxes, stuff like that. So when it was implemented in these other states, you're looking at drastic increases in voter participation, and it's, from what I understand, it's supposed to cut down voter fraud. It cuts out some of these people registering dead people and stuff like that. So I don't know, I just find it interesting, because it's really, I mean, it's in a lot of states, but it's still not in it's not even close to half the states. So I just
I can hear the conservative arguments coming out of the gate about, well, how do you know who's who? How do you register the person? But I mean, I think when you were talking about it earlier, you said Illinois has had a great voter turnout response. They haven't had any problems with it. And I think the whole issue of voter fraud is just a ridiculous red herring to begin with.
The conservative argument is like somehow, because like they say immigrants or people that aren't citizens can still get license, can still get a driver's license through other means. And that would register them to vote. But when I actually read into it, I mean, they have stuff not in place. They have stuff in place to stop people that just have driver's license from other means. So like it'll pick up immigration status or nationality when it goes to register you to vote. It's not just going to register you to vote because you have a license.
Yeah, I think one of the other arguments that conservatives will throw up, and this is one that I heard a lot growing up, is that voting there's a big percentage of the population, or a large part of the population, that thinks voting is not a right, but it's a privilege. So if you actually care about voting, the privilege of voting and the privilege of living in a democracy, you'll put the effort forth to go get yourself registered. I'm not inherently opposed to the idea of an automatic voter registration. I'm not going to get up in arms about its passing and super excited, but I'm not going to be super pissed off if states don't have it. I think it's going to just have to be one of those things we wait and see how it responds. That's the great thing about living in a republic. Right. States can test things out.
I mean, most states, like the state of Virginia, you register once and then you're registered. Like
voter, baby.
You just show up with your driver's license and that's the end of the story. They'll make you, I believe, what do? They make you recite your address. That's it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. It's not particularly hard to vote in the first place, and if this is something that's going to get more people out to the polls, I don't see where it's that big of a issue.
Yeah. My dad and I both have an on-running sort of internal debate with ourselves, where the meme where the guy can't figure out which button to push, and he's like mopping his head with a rag, and it's normally used politically. My dad and I we used to joke back and forth that as people that are big proponents of democracy, we firmly believe in it. We think it's great that people get out and vote, but at the same time, we think most people are really, really stupid, and more people voting kind of scares us.
Nothing
but it does.
We had people turn out to this election, and look what happened. It's
Steve Bannon was registered in 2 states. I think he ought to have his rights taken away.
Well, he's got the ethics waiver, so he's okay.
Oh yeah, I forgot. It's like diplomatic immunity and lethal weapon. He can probably kill a prostitute.
We moved pretty quick today. So now let's move down into this week in Trump. It's not really that much to go on this week. Like there's a handful.
Yeah.
But we already touched on it earlier with Gary Cohn talking about coal no longer making sense as a feedstock, and I already talked about solar and wind are growing rapidly. Solar growing at 17 times the U.S. economy.
Check out Vox's new video on nuclear energy too. It's actually really good about how they're making it more efficient. They're making it safer. I'm a big proponent of nuclear, so.
Is nuclear paying you? What is going on here?
No, I think it's really, really cool. It's efficient. So right now, actually, really interestingly, with the rods that you use to get energy, you only get like 2% of the available fuel out of them before the rods start to melt and you have to replace them. Then you got a lot of excess like residue you got to figure out something with. There's a company out west in California, obviously. Everything's in California apparently except DC. They are developing this new type of this pelletized fuel for nuclear reactors that lets you get like 90% of the fuel potential out of it. So you have less waste. You get much more efficient about everything. I'm just a big fan of nuclear. Nuclear has an unjustly bad name, in my opinion, based off of a couple of bad state-run facility accidents that I don't think justify the bad name.
Yeah, you should go look into the companies using nuclear waste as batteries.
Oh, really?
Pretty interesting as well. But anyways, we're not talking about
Sorry.
nuclear. We're moving away. I just find it interesting. We have this president that, like I said, we've been touching on quite a few times, like these leaks. He insists on stopping these leaks when the leaks are literally coming from his own staff. And then you have one of his staffers right here going on talking, like basically this president who's bumping coal, telling coal miners, better get ready to work your ass off. And then he's going, it's not really worth it in the grand scheme of things.
We're going to make America dusty again.
One of those things that I keep saying is, who are you going to sell this coal to? I mean, maybe right now there are still countries and counties and cities and states that will buy coal. But if you're talking about like 2030, these states in every country in the world except for Nicaragua and Syria are going to be moving to clean energy, then how is it feasible to reopen mines? We're talking about what, 15, 20 years from now they're going to be moving away from this. What is the point of this? It just seems like Trump, he's 70 years old and he's probably going to be dead by 2030, so he just doesn't give a shit. He just has no foresight.
I bet he's going to try to work on the death tax, the inheritance tax next. That way Jared and Ivanka and his kids don't have to pay taxes on their justly gotten gains. Mm-hmm. But also, it's just for further context, I know that we've said a couple times that Syria and Nicaragua are the only two countries in the world that didn't sign this Paris Agreement aside from us. That means that North Korea did.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in for a minute. Again, I understand it's a feel good agreement, but it's just really funny.
Well, yeah, I mean,
North Korea.
Yeah. So think about that. You have Venezuela, Turkey. I mean, China's on it. Russia signed this. Every other any state. I mean, not
Mexico
state,
got the cartel's approval to sign it.
Any country, Cuba signed it. Everybody in the world signed it, except for us, a failed state, and one that's too poor to do it in the first place.
I'm not sure which one you're talking about when you say each of those. It really could be either of them.
It's interchangeable, okay? I'm just giving you some clarification. All right.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
let's
next
move on to
TWIT
McCain's
issue
statement this week, where he came out and put Putin over ISIS as the biggest threat to the world.
He is much better organized.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, we should have talked about this beforehand, where you kind of want to be like, that's ridiculous, but then at the same time you're like, yeah, man, maybe
ISIS doesn't have nukes, so all right.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll give you that one, John McCain.
Russia's got they're a little more organized. He continued and talked about how North Korea is a serious crisis. Talked about concerns. I think I mentioned it earlier. Concerns about pulling out of the Paris Accords. And he's the one that I did, because I talked about how he said Obama should have got congressional approval so Trump couldn't tamper with this. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you always want This Week in Trump just to be something railing against the administration. This is just one of those things where you're kind of like, that's interesting, and I know where to put it.
Yeah. Neat point.
Then we have the White House ordering agencies to ignore Democratic oversight requests.
Most transparent administration in history.
It's just, I mean, they're not. This isn't something that's unheard
Mostly
of.
because of the leaks, not because of anything else.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're just following his campaign promises by giving out. They're just being really transparent, giving out every piece of information that happens the second it happens.
The president had another well done steak with ketchup today.
Well, it's also like certain stuff like, oh yeah, Trump gave away secrets in the meeting with the Russian ambassadors. How many people were in the room? Is it that hard to figure out who told on him?
God damn it, Tim! I told you to stop talking with him.
Like, it's really not that hard to figure out unless you have the entire White House staff in the room when you had this meeting. It shouldn't be that hard to figure out who's telling on him.
I mean, I feel like this man makes a big deal and has the hail to the chief like play on someone's phone every time he walks to the bathroom and has a successful piss. So I'm willing to bet they were
well,
like
he's 70
probably
years
like
old.
10
You know how
people
big
in
his
that room.
prostate is? He probably does have to have that after he has a successful piss. But I mean,
Alright.
we talked about this personally, but I mean, this isn't something that's unheard of. It's unheard of to just tell them to outright ignore the request, but it's not unheard of to make the opposition wait.
You ignore them with an implication. You don't actually tell people to ignore them.
Yes. So the rest of it, we can just make fun of Trump. Because this week, after watching what we assume to be something on Fox News or MSNBC, Trump tweeted something saying that Carter Page has information that's going to blow away the Democrats' case against him in the Russia scandal. But keep in mind that Trump, I believe he said this himself, right? That he's never personally met Carter Page. He's not, or he doesn't know him personally, but he knows.
He was involved with the campaign for like 10 minutes or something.
But he knows he has information that's just gonna blow this away. You think in his head that he thinks that this is like maybe the investigators are gonna see this and be like, oh man, we should just let this go now, huh?
I think Trump thinks that he is pulling the crazy like a fox angle. Maybe if I just give so much conflicting information all at once, they'll form their own narrative out of it. And while everyone's distracted, I'll escape the room.
Well, yeah, maybe with a golf cart because he can't walk.
Yeah, I'll get on my golf cart.
Just picture him with his arms crossed and his little like turtle smug look as he wheels out of the room, like nobody playing "Hail to the Chief." No one can see me.
He has a gas-operated golf cart because you need to fund the energy sector.
We have the White House in a statement to Europe as a whole, I guess, that Trump only picks on you because he likes you. Similar to a second-grade boy pinching a second-grade girl on the playground. That is Trump's relationship with Europe. Which,
that's
oddly
also the
enough, sums
patriarchy?
it up. Yeah, it sums it up pretty... Oh, God. Really? You went there? Okay.
We're allowing this type of discrimination. I'm sorry.
Well, off this topic, I didn't know we were... Anyway, and then the last topic of this tirade through bullshit is Trump. It came up again this week about Trump's plans to reverse the Cuba policy, which essentially just allowed citizens to travel to Cuba. Though I'd imagine that's having a pretty decent impact on Cuba's economy, being able to have Americans travel there and spend money. But
yeah, I swear it seems like he's just trying to. You know how like if you're trying to be creative, you know how like we were writing papers in college and you're like, oh, maybe if I try this will work. And he's just trying everything. Do you remember how shocked he was when like the Democrats didn't support him when he fired Comey? I feel like he's just running out of ideas and he's like, let's just go ahead and do this thing.
He's supposed to announce this in a speech this month in Miami, but that's not confirmed. There's supposed to be a bipartisan trio of lawmakers there in support of it: Rubio, Mendez, and Diaz-Balart. I don't know. They're all there to be in. I don't understand what's favorable about this reversal. Like, what is negative about allowing people to travel to Cuba again?
Probably because Obama did it, and he's not an American.
Yeah, I don't really understand why we still have this trade embargo against Cuba. Like, which doesn't make sense to me. if why is it that he wants better relations with Russia, but he wants nothing to do with Cuba? When the
It's
whole
probably
reason
got
we have
everything.
this, the whole reason we have this embargo against Cuba is because of Russia, correct?
Well, the Soviet Union, they were different, I guess.
Okay,
But
you know what
for
I-
me, I think,
you-
yeah. For me, I think the whole thing comes down to the Cuban expat population in Florida. Cuban Americans in Florida, if I'm not mistaken, really don't like Cuba. They don't like either of the Castros, and they are ardently anti-Cuba. Or Cuba. Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like a pretentious asshole there.
Too late.
Chile, Cuba,
Cuba. Let me keep
Nicaragua.
saying this, you fucking
Cubano.
twit.
Anyway, so anyway, the only justification I can think of is he's trying to shore up Republican votes in Florida for the ethnic Cuban or Cuban expat population out there, just so that they will get him to vote. So they'll vote Republican, because I mean Cubans in Florida can be ribaldly anti-Cuba, because
I'm
you
sure
know
there's-
Castro liked to lock people up and torture people and stuff.
Right. I mean, I'm sure, like, if we actually dig into Cuba, there's probably a lot that we could say in both sides of this argument, but
But it's just way more fun to make fun of him for.
I
a
just
really
feel like
dumb
it's not
idea.
something that needs to be focused on right now at all.
Yeah, it's such a small potatoes thing, and it's also, it brings no benefit if you lift a trade embargo and you allow people to travel. Great, you're taking people that are living in poverty under a quote unquote communist government, or just a dictatorship, and you're stimulating their economy. You're giving them wealth, which stabilizes countries, and that can easily move to a much more liberal, egalitarian, potentially democratic society. There's literally no loss.
Unless you're Donald Trump.
Yeah, we're still
Stop.
bitter because Thomas Jefferson wasn't able to get it.
Yeah. Well, he just wants to stop giving the Mexicans money because he has no idea that Cuba isn't part of Mexico. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Just a clusterfuck of information. Kramer's first blog post is out on the website, the Armchair Constituents.com. It'd be nice if I could say the name of our website.
That's trademarked.
You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher. You can get it directly from the website. And I'm trying to think what else. Leave a rating and a comment if you can. That'll help us boost up the chart. Maybe get a little bit more attention. And yeah, read the blog post and comment. I'm sure Kramer wants to hear what you have to say or what you think.
Be nice though. If you're going to be, critical, be constructive. I would like that. Yeah, that's basically it. Next week, episode
Just
10.
call him
double digits.
names. Just call him names. He'll grow. He'll grow from it. It'll strengthen.
I need to get a thicker skin.
Also,
yeah.
we have a Discord, which I don't think I've ever touched on. I might have. But we have a public Discord where you can come and yell at us personally. And we would love that. We would love that a lot.
I've got that news feed already beeping in my ear every 5 seconds. Now I'm going to have someone like, you sound like an idiot.
I'm going to put the link to the Discord in the information from now on, the details for the podcast. If you go to the SoundCloud, there's a direct link to it. But, yeah, we'd love to have some people in there. But I think that's it. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah. Until next week, hopefully something exciting will happen, and I'll talk to you later.